City School District Board of Education follows a bi-monthly meeting schedule. The first meeting of the month is called our committee meeting. At this meeting, we fully discuss our agenda for the board meeting to be held the third Thursday of each month. As board members, we encourage you to attend, watch, and listen to our committee discussion, resulting in action at the board meetings. For full disclosure, our committee meetings and board meetings are always announced, video and audio taped, as well as posted to our webpage for your view. All of our meetings are public and visitors are welcome. Candace, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Russo.
Present.
Mr. Atwood.
Present.
Mrs. Ballard. Here. Mrs. Cole. Present. Mrs. Richter. Present.
Please stand for the pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move into discussion items. Item 3.01, we'd like to welcome Mrs. Lynette Edwards with Children's First. Hi. And you can go ahead and take the floor.
Okay. So I'm here today to talk about Family Student Support Services and just the progress we've made and some efforts towards sustainability. And my main focus, because we need to think strategically about Norwood kids this year, that is my main focus of coming here. And if we have time after discussing some partners, numbers, some success stories, a need and a request, and just some things on the horizon, that I have a couple sentences about attendance that's going on, work there, prevention science, brain science, our mental health support members, and just professional development that's ongoing. How many people know about Norwood Kids? Everybody. Good. So, Norwood Kids began with a small number of partners, and we've expanded. So we have the Children's Home, Every Child Succeeds, Spark, Hippie, 4C for Children, Our School, of course, Baby Bear, and Play and Learns. And United Way helps us with this effort as well. But one of the things that is part of our progress is we've identified over the course of 4 going on 5 years that people enter the system with Norwood Kids a couple different ways. And one of the things we're really focused on this year is gateways. So if a mom comes to Baby Bear with a new baby, that is a really great opportunity to begin a long-lasting relationship. And everybody know what Baby Bear is? Everybody knows. Okay. And Great Start is another like a workshop for parents. It's a one-time event, whereas Baby Bear is twice a month. And Play and Learn is twice a month, and that is an opportunity in an evidence-based fashion for parents and kids to play together in a evidence-based model before school. And that's this week. If anybody ever wants to come observe, you can always follow us on Norwood Kids Facebook page for events. So our hope is that they go deeper into the relationship. So someone who might be prenatal, or maybe they just had a newborn, maybe in Every Child Succeeds. The nice thing about the Norwood Kids Collaborative is that because of the way the funding is set up, we can take second-time moms. There are no economic restrictions on any of our programs. High, low, there's something for everyone. Hello. 0 to 3 is what Every Child Succeeds provides weekly visits for. And then Hippie is an at-home instruction project or program where at the end of 3 and then definitely 4 and 5-year-olds getting ready for kindergarten. You can also be in preschool in these programs at the same time. It's only going to add to a child's success. But some people prefer, maybe they have a work schedule issue, so this is a really great way for them to get curriculum and to start practicing some skills that they need once in the classroom. Spark is very similar to Hippie, although Hippie really focuses on the parent. Spark
is curriculum for the child with the parent involved. So it's kind of a different view. Something that's brand new, we had our first training for ambassadors. One of the things that we have noticed is that even though we have all these partners, we can't be everywhere. And we know there's about 800 children under 5 in Norwood, and we really want to be at every event that we can. And we have picked key activities where we definitely show up and try to get people to sign up. I think Val saw me at Bounce Back to School, for example. And while that's successful, we know that parent to parent can help even more. So we ask ambassadors to come. We teach them, here's the elevator speech about Norwood Ready Kids. And all you have to do is ask them, may we contact them and get them on like a MailChimp list that we have. And then hot off the presses is Norwood Strong Families. Well, let me go back for 1 second. Ambassadors, we meet quarterly, and we ask other ambassadors to bring a friend. So we've met once. It was very successful, and people walked away passionate. We provide them with flyers so they can give information about Play and Learn or these other activities to other parents. Norwood Strong Families is something I need to submit today. We noticed there's a gap. So when we serve families in Norwood, we have a lot of walking families, which is fantastic. It's a great city where you can do that, and maybe you don't have like a vehicle, but a lot of our activities are like Sharpsburg area, South Norwood. We really want the Norwood Strong Families groups to be at view. And even though 4C is running those Norwood Strong Families, and they have a lovely facility, if you ever get a chance to see it, it's located in the center of town in the CDK building. They just really wanted that commitment for parents in the building, and Mr. Yates is fine with that idea, but we do need to do a formal facilities request. So I think it will be very successful, hoping to start that in October. And are there any questions about that? This is the report card for Norwood Ready Kids. I keep stats. Every month we have a ground crew meeting, and Every Child Succeeds has had 37 year-to-date families involved, up from 19 at the end of last year. Hippie is strong at 11. Each program has like a goal, how much the funding can provide. Hippie has 6 new pending this fall with 11 strong. Spark is at 12. Play and Learn has served 41 families this year. We started tracking preschool because we really want to show that we're getting people to register for preschool sooner. So we were really excited to see that 99 students were already enrolled. We're almost full. It's great. Head Start changed to all-day preschool this year, and they have been on wait lists since mid-August. And then probably definitely the number I'm most excited about is that we ended the year in 2018 with 78 signed consents. We made a goal for 150 by the end of this year, and we are right now at 148 with a baby due any day. The more people who consent, then we can follow to see the success with. It's a long-term commitment, this Norwood Ready Kids business, because you could take a child from 0 and you're trying to get great reading scores at 3rd grade. We will check KRA scores as well as 3rd grade scores, as long as the parent agrees. We also track warm handoffs, so we were at 96. That's just when the ground crew comes together from all those organizations. We ask, how many times did you tell a family, here's another resource for you? So we track those, and right now we're at 125, and I alone am getting 1 request per 3 days. So I don't go more, even on a weekend, the average is 3 days. Every 3 days, somehow, some way. I mean, it could be every 2 days, but the average is every 3 days. And then we just started ambassadors. We have 8. And then we're tracking referrals. We have 28 people that we're currently calling to say, hey, would you like to do this program or that program? Questions about that?
So 148, our goal is 150.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there may be some families that have multiple kids.
Mm-hmm. That represents an individual child.
That represents an individual child. Do we have any way to be able to estimate how many potential kids? Like if our goal is 150, and we're looking at specifically the, under 5 crowd, right? Like how many potential children under 5 are in the city of Norwood that we could potentially service?
So that's something we wrestle with all the time. I think as we get traction and everybody knows more and more, although this is a renewable population, right? So people get over 5 years old pretty quick. From Children's Hospital, we heard 803 or so under 5. But
is there any way we could use live birth data to kind of see if we can come up with an estimate, maybe to help her?
Yeah, I can look at that. I can pull my birth data, but the thing is you don't know who's still living here.
Well, no, I mean, Norwood's a transient community, and so that number's going to fluctuate, I mean, almost from day to day.
Yeah.
But it would just kind of, I think it may help you as you put forth future goals,
Right.
right? That way you don't stretch yourself, you know, maybe pick the right stretch goal for the right purpose.
I think
We're also
so.
restricted with certain handles too on how much information they're able to give us, so it may or may not benefit us. Knowing how many doesn't tell us where they are at all. So I mean, we're still pretty much restricted on that.
No, but her goal right now isn't relying on that.
True.
She's just trying to reach a certain number. But knowing whether or not that number is encompassing the total number of available kids to reach, I think is important. You need to know what that upper level limit is.
I'm
So-
actually wondering if there's anything you can build a contacts list for us, like an actual comprehensive, this is what this group does, here's the contact for it. This is what this group does, here's the contact for it. And that way we can even post that onto the school's website for resources, because parents start looking at preschool programming well before, at least we hope so. And that would be one place to advertise it right on our website.
It's on there, I believe, under preschool.
But is there comprehensive information about each item, or does it just say Norwood Ready Kids, here's a contact number? Because if somebody doesn't know necessarily what that means or what it entails or what the services specifically are, we may be able to expand that a little bit to help folks understand what it is. And maybe our Facebook page or something like that in the district, we could maybe highlight a new program each week.
It explains each program.
Okay.
And then the goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenna, but the goal of Norwood Ready Kids is regardless of who you reach out to, they will put you in contact with the right person. So if they contact me or Glenna or whoever oversees Hippie, it's just a one-stop shop, and we'll help you get in touch with every other organization that you may need. So that's,
Maybe we can do a better job of helping you advertise that then.
I think that would be great. You know, people need to hear things like 7 to 66 times. So that would be very helpful. I would appreciate that. Just wanted to share a few success stories. I mean, sometimes you feel like you're seeing like miracles in front of you in some ways, just seeing how connections come together. Meeting baby bear families who maybe they had an older child who needed a referral. For some, you know, it could be any reason, but those are really great moments when you're able to serve a whole family because you went to meet a newborn. We know that registration for preschool is happening earlier, and we're pretty excited about that. 2 teachers, without me asking them, came to me, one preschool, one kindergarten teacher, and just shared, hey, my kids are showing up more ready. And they were really excited about that this year. We're able to assess needs earlier. We've had some families who got some help that made sure that their child started kindergarten with the items in place that they needed. We were super excited about that. And we have moms who are intentionally thinking about dialogic reading at an early age and also thinking about how to create better synapses in the brain. And what these moms are doing just blows my mind. They're doing a great job. And it's all because conversation after conversation in all these different groups. My next thing is to look at dosage. And that's actually my ground crew's homework this month. So we've taken the list of families and how many of them have been in multiple programs. And I've kind of got an algorithm going in my mind about what that might look like if you compare it to kindergarten scores, but we'll have to look at that. I'm pretty excited because everybody's wanted to get to the moment of dosage, but to date it's just, are you in or are you not? And Kathy always says diapers to diplomas, so that's kind of an honor for me to think about all the time. These are our funders. Shepherd Chemical spearheaded this. School Outfitters and Kydell Plumbing, all of these partners have not only funded the program, but really encouraged us. And my ask of our group is that if we could write a letter of thanks, even if I write it and you edit it, I think it would be very powerful. There's always been a question because there's so many partners involved, just of our investment, and I know we're all invested in it, but I think a letter to these funders would mean a lot to them. So that's my ask. All right, any other questions about Norwood kids? And then also, do you want me to stop, or else I could go on?
I have a question for you that was brought up to me recently. I mentioned at the last board meeting. We do have some families in the area who are not necessarily Christian-based families. And I know some of the events were hosted at churches locally. They did not feel very comfortable to partake in these services because they were specifically held in churches. And I know that sometimes it's just where space is available, where folks are willing to open their doors and say, hey, you can use this. If there's any way that we can be of a better service to you to provide a space that can be neutral territory, you know, that's working with one of our buildings that's not under construction at the time, whatever you might need, because I would never want any family to feel for any reason uncomfortable to attend one of these amazing service that you guys set up. So please let us know how we can help that.
I appreciate that, and I've been aware of it. If I've ever had questions, I always say we're borrowing space. It would help if it's okay to use View for this parent group, because that's one of our efforts to serve everyone without having to say we're borrowing space. It feels very together if we're doing this activity for these parents in a school building. So, any other questions about that? Should I go on or should I stop? These are just a few like bullet points. Just know that I am visiting kindergarten families. If someone misses school, we leave a note, or we hopefully talk to parents in some cases just about the importance of not missing school, and that, you know, just kind of the stats about what that looks like when you're in kindergarten, that every day matters. And we use attendanceworks.org strategies and toolkit and those kinds of flyers. We have 11 children and parents that are signed up for what I'm calling the 1021 prizes. So just some areas that we know that kids miss more than maybe other areas. So we're really targeting those children in a positive way and just connecting with their parents and saying, hey, you know, we've made it to day 10. So you're almost there, or we're getting closer to 21, with the idea of like creating new habits. So every 3 weeks, you know, that they get rewarded. I have a prize box, and some people have donated some gift cards. We're also encouraging parents who are walking over a mile one way. So if it's a rainy day, I try to get out to, what is that road? Sherman. And when I see parents passing, just to give them $5 gift card to McDonald's, just to say, you know, thanks for pushing this stroller in the rain to get to school. We really appreciate it, and way to be a great parent. Prevention science, so PAC support is ongoing. I'm just honored by our teachers and everyone involved in the brain science behind PACs. And Becca Jones is with us, K through 12, and is doing a great job to support some, behavior and how to monitor brain activity so that kids learn even better ways to communicate with one another and with the adults in their lives. For mental health support, we ended May with 112 school-based therapy cases open, and in September we're already at 114. And I would like to look at this as good news because we know nationally that the need for school-based therapy is a big deal, and Norwood's doing a great job of providing that support. Any questions about that? So we have other staff members that can help other pieces of that for internal check-ins and some crisis management or pre-meltdown, just helping a kid, be ready to get back in the classroom. But that is what our outside agency is doing right now. We have ongoing professional development. I'm really happy from Chris and Shannon to just dive into some of these topics: developmental assets in the classroom, ACEs for adverse childhood experiences, developmental relationship building skills. Those three we've created like introductory courses for. We could always go and dive deeper, but people seem to be really happy with those and seem to enjoy learning more, and just gives words to things that we know sometimes intuitively, but it's the science behind what we're doing well in the school buildings. And QPR is suicide prevention for question, persuade, and refer. We've trained all the middle school staff and all the high school staff, and the youth were trained the last 2 days for the Hope Squad. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Glenda. It's, and hearing all of that, you think it's more Ready Kids and it's 0 to 5, but look at, you have your reach all through from 0 to 18, so we thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Is there anything we can do for you as a board beyond getting the word out, or?
I think the advertising for Norwood Kids is a big deal. The gratitude letter to our funders would be great, because this is year 5. So I think if we do that letter in the spring, it is not as great as doing it right now in the fall. So, and I think they'll be touched by that. It's like if it had everyone's signature in this room, I think they would sincerely be touched by that.
I'm sure we're all willing to commit to that. We can,
Maybe we could invite him to a meeting and present it specifically from the board and invite you back to help us with
do
that.
that. Let's work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe Glenda, you could have a contact person with the address to make that easier to write a formal letter.
Yes.
Some of them have been acknowledged by the board in the past at different times for their contributions. But we could do both in the end, and maybe that'll just make that letter writing part go a little more smoothly.
I can get that to you.
Thank you.
And maybe the letter could go out sooner and then invite them, because their schedules, you just never know.
I would say we'll plan to just have the card ready at the next meeting, and then we can make sure it gets sent out.
At least the Shepherd Chemical Company has talked about possibly inviting kind of a business breakfast for associates they know who might also want to be part of Norwood Kids. So that could be something that comes up at sometime soon.
What's neat about that is, they're thinking 18 years out, what they're thinking for economic development. It helps all of Norwood when we serve 0 to 5s. All right, can I leave this request for facilities with someone. Is that you? And should I stay or you?
You're always welcome to stay, but we know you're a busy lady, so she can get on with other things.
And thank you, everyone. I can't tell you how much I enjoy my job every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lana. Item 3.02 is construction. And we have Mr. John Peter with us.
Thank you. I'd like to start with the middle school. The middle school project is winding down. As a matter of fact, last Friday was the last day we actually had painters on site all day long. So we really have no one else there, I won't say full time, but they will be coming and going as they deal with punch list items. Ron Hicks with SHP, our architect, put together a list of 20 to 25 items that we should have addressed, we will have addressed. There are such things as one classroom has 2 lights that aren't working. The VRF system in the auditorium is a little bit on the loud side, so they're looking at ways they can better insulate and try to knock down some of the noise that that's making. There's a couple of rooms that have ceiling pads that need to be installed. They just got missed. There's some extra debris on the roof that they need to come back and clean up. So all in all, it's 20 to 25 items that they'll get taken care of. One big item that I want everyone to know about is there is a compressor on the roof of the east wing. I believe it serves the auditorium. The compressor, when they went to start it up, turned out it was not working. So they have to come back and replace it. They have to bring a crane to do that. They've got it scheduled for Thursday at noon to be on site, to take care of everything they have to do on the roof. The crane is going to show up probably around 3:30 after school lets out and pickup is finished with. The crane will do what it has to do and then be gone for the next morning's drop off at 7:30. But they will still be replacing the compressor that they are switching out on Friday. So the auditorium will be the one place they probably won't have AC from about noon on Thursday until noon or the end of the day on Friday. So I will check again to see if there's anything going on in the auditorium that we need to let people know about. I don't think it'll make too much of a difference to have one unit down, but I will double check into that again. So that's it on the middle school. If anybody has any questions about that.
Do we have an estimated time for the completion of the punch list items? Or are we looking in a couple weeks?
Ron has not yet. I think today or tomorrow he was going to give this list to Monarch. So they have not actually seen Ron's full list yet.
Okay.
Dave and I had a chance today to kind of look it over and see if there was things we were going to add or had already been taken care of or whatever. So I had my chance at it. Dave was looking at it this afternoon, and I think Ron was either going to give it to Monarch this evening or tomorrow.
Okay.
So hopefully after that we would have a better idea of how long it'll take for them to take care of those items. But other than the big crane issue, there's a couple of thermostats actually I think in your area that still have air codes. There's nothing really that should take exceptionally a lot of time.
Perfect.
Move on to Sharpsburg.
That's what we all want to hear.
I'm sure it is. The question was raised end of last week if we could know the exact date of when the inspections were going to take place. I tried to get better information yesterday morning with PACVAN. The answer I was given was that they could not schedule the inspections on the modulars until they actually had permits. I thought they had permits. That was my misunderstanding. The permit that we got from the variance when we went up to Ashland, Ohio, and so we got the variance approval on that, and then about a week or week and a half later, we got our permit from the city. PACVAN could not go and get their permits for the electrical and the plumbing side of the work until they had what we had given them in the middle of August. So it's been several weeks now. They are still waiting to get those permits. Once they get those permits and the work has been completed, they can then get the inspections. Fortunately, they started doing the work before they had the permit, and the work is essentially complete now, but as soon as they get the permit, they can schedule the inspections. I did contact PAC-BAN this afternoon to see, because the schedule I had been told end of last week was that they hoped to have all of their work done, like the ramps go to get into the modulars, and the fire alarm system still needs to be hooked up. They were hoping to have that complete by the end of this week, Friday. And then they told us hopefully by the 18th they would have the inspections completed, and the 18th is a week from tomorrow. When I contacted PAC-BAN this afternoon, she replied to me at about 4:30 today that she said she feels a little bit more comfortable saying the 23rd. So we're still within that range of the 30th that we had been presenting, but it's getting closer. So that's where we stand with that. As far as the building itself, Century has been going along great. Everything's been going fine. They appear to be right on schedule. We've only had a couple of change orders come in there, and they've been relatively minor things. I think at one point they went core drilling, and they actually did a conduit that fed a electrical panel. So they figured, well, we're going to go ahead and replace the conduit, the wire, and put a new panel in. So, but that was relatively minor compared to what it could have been. I think it was $2,000 or so. As I mentioned before, the ramps for the modulars, hopefully they can be completed by early next week, and the fire alarm system should be completed hopefully by this Friday. Other than that, I think that's it for Sharpsburg.
So I think we all just want to know if we, the inspections and all of that are completed at the 23rd, and then what does the release look like to the teachers then at that point?
Well, once we get the inspections from IBI for the electrical and MSD for the plumbing, the city would still come in and do their inspections, and the fire department. And as long as all those pass, if the date she's giving of the 23rd is still good, hopefully within a day or two of that time, we can then take occupancy. I know Dr. Sabo had said she wanted to have an open house, so we still want to have some time to do that, and the teachers need to set up their areas. So we're still looking in the range of the 18th to the 25th or so, maybe.
They will start on the 30th.
If not sooner.
And then
If not
preschool will start on the 30th.
That's the open house he's talking
Right.
about. We'll have an open house for them, and then open house for parents that of the school age kiddos before we move them in.
Okay. Separate from the preschool open house?
Yeah, probably, because preschool has to get up and running
Right.
immediately.
Right.
By the 30th.
Okay.
So.
Any questions?
Anybody else have any questions? So I have some questions. So we started this process back in February with PAC-BAN, and I want to have some clarity as to whose responsibility it is specifically for acquiring and scheduling all of the required permits.
My understanding is PAC-BAN's.
Okay, so if we go back and we look at the contract that we signed back in February, it says specifically in there that the leasee is responsible for acquiring and scheduling all the permits. Is anybody else aware?
That just doesn't make sense. I mean, I know that's what, I'm not
Pull it up right now.
doubting you at all. It just, when you think of the technical expertise that it takes to place one of them and to get a permit for one of them, and they have never ever said, you are responsible for the permits during this process. It's always been, they're the ones that have prepared all the documents and
And you've met pretty regularly.
yeah.
Right, so PAC-BAN rental agreement in our February meeting, pull it up and you go down there on the first page. item number 2 in the subsection. Leasing is responsible for securing any and all building permits, licenses, or approvals necessary for the use of the leased equipment. So, having said that, I want to understand the process for which has to occur from this moment moving forward to get everybody in place to make sure we get people where they need to be in order to have the inspections and the permits secured, acquired, and scheduled. So what specifically needs to happen tomorrow? What needs to happen tomorrow? What are we waiting on right now?
We're waiting for the permit
Which permit?
from IBI and from the plumbers, the county for the plumbers.
Okay. When did it become available for us to apply for the permit for the IBI?
The plumber applies for the permit and the electrician, who are subcontractors of PACVAN.
Okay. I'm just trying to follow the path here so I understand exactly how this process works. So that way when we come and are asked questions by the constituents of the city as to why we're not in these buildings yet, at least we have some knowledge as to what the process is going to be moving forward. So when we got the permit from the city, so we had to go get a variance from the state, and that was given to us in early August, correct?
We got the variance from the state in early August, but then it went back to the city of Norwood, and they sent it back to Majid.
Which I have an issue with, but that's a separate issue. Okay.
I have the same issue with that.
Okay. All right.
So we got the permit from the city about a week and a half later.
Okay. So once we got the permit from the city, so what needed to happen immediately following getting that from the city?
The subcontractors, the electricians and the plumbers, the subcontractors for PACVAN, submitted to their, I'm not going to say their companies, but their inspectors to get the permits that they needed. And that's what they're still waiting on.
They're waiting on those?
That's what I was told yesterday.
Do we know that they've been submitted?
I was told yesterday that they had been submitted.
Okay. But do we have proof that they've been submitted?
I do not have proof.
Okay. So according to the contract that we signed with PACVAN, we're responsible for this. So we need to know whether or not those things have been submitted. I mean, if we're responsible for getting these permits and these inspections done, even though you know the subcontractor's the person doing it, we have the oversight there to make sure that this stuff's getting done in the time which that it needs to be done for us to minimize any impact for our students, our staff, and anybody else that's involved. And that's what I'm trying to get at here.
When I read that, I have no idea. I read it as we are responsible for obtaining the permits to get the modular units here, which would have been the first permit that we got, the one from that you had to go to the state for.
Right.
And then the work that they're doing, the subcontractors or PACVAN themselves have to have people come out and approve the work that they did.
So where is that spelled out in this document?
I don't know.
And I'm wondering if it's even more general than that, because the permits are in our name. I'm sure when you go and look at the actual permit that's stuck on a wall somewhere, it says that Norwood City Schools has permission to put modulars in these units following this plan. So really, they can't absorb that in their contract. They can't say that because they're not the owner of the building. So the permits are going to be in our name, but I don't think that makes us responsible for applying for them and having that technical expertise. Now, that being said, I am fine with emailing Beth and saying, sending proof that these permits were done. We need to know where we're at.
Right, even if the permits are done, that they've been submitted, right? We want to know, because what I'm trying to get at is if there are wasted days here because somebody sat on their thumbs and didn't submit the application when it was available for them to submit, I have an issue with that because that's costing us days.
Sure.
That's costing us educational days at this point. And we started this process back in February.
Do we have any idea why permits were not submitted back then, or if they were?
It's not
Where
like,
did the first delay happen? Where did that?
it's
They
not
could
that
not
they weren't.
submit until they had the variance from the city hall.
But when did we first apply for that with the city, and how long did the city hold us before they could get started?
They were
Because
first
again,
applied in
I believe
late
April.
April, early May.
So if we applied in April, how long did the city hold? Did they hold us up until we had to go to the state level in August?
There was a delay there. There was a delay at the city. And we're not really sure why that was. I don't know if the city wanted to relay the information just to us rather than to PAC-BAN. But,
So PAC-BAN could not work because the city was holding this up. It wasn't something that PAC-BAN forgot to file.
but then what PAC-BAN filed was not anywhere complete also. So it's not like this has been more than one issue.
Several laws were done.
So, I mean, you know, what happened back in April and what happened over the summer happened over the summer. So what I'm more concerned about with right now is what needs to happen tomorrow to make sure that everything is in process, that there are no more wasted days to get everybody into those things where they need to be. I mean, that's my concern with this. So, and the reason why I'm bringing it up now is I want to make everybody acutely aware that, you know, even though it may not necessarily be our specific job, because there may be some question on as to who's supposed to do what, we better cover ourselves and make sure that we're doing everything that we can, even though it may not necessarily be our job, to make sure that we're speeding this process along.
I know that last week, Dr. Sabo was providing some pretty heavy heat to
Right.
PAC-BAN. I mean, I know I was thinking myself.
Well,
So-
I sent the email asking for a date. I didn't ask for an exact date, I asked for a date.
Right.
Right? I also asked if we could invite a PAC-BAN representative to be here today to participate in the discussion, which would have made so much more helpful sense. Right? And then my last part of that email is if that person wouldn't come to the meeting, I want to know why. Right? So my last question is was a representative from PAC-BAN asked to be here? And if they declined, why did they decline?
I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to ask.
Okay.
Kathy.
All right. So my entire concern here is, you know, whatever happened over the summer and through August happened over the summer and through August. So it's about moving forward from this point on. So what needs to happen tomorrow? What needs to happen on Monday? What needs to happen next Wednesday?
Thank you, John.
You.
We will move on to item 3.03, Ohio's school report card. And Mrs. Chesson will be leading us through this discussion. Looks like we all have a report card for review.
Thank you, Madam President. There are 4 pieces of information that I want to review with the board this evening. Our achievement data, a little bit on our gifted indicator, our gap closing, and then our scores at a glance. So this Friday is the scheduled release for the report card information to the public. So we saw what that final score will look like. It was published on the 8th, so just a few days ago. So the first thing I want to look at is your Excel spreadsheet that shows last year's data and this year's data comparison. And this is just at a glance our achievement data. And so on the left-hand side, you will see the spring scores from 2018, and on the right-hand side, the spring scores from 2019. So where I've highlighted in green are our success areas. Those are where we achieve the indicator outright. So you can note that for our buildings and our district. If I just go through the columns, they start with 3rd grade and move their way through the high school with all of our state assessments. They're called end of course exams or end of year tests. And the indicators is the percent you have to achieve in that grade level to achieve that indicator outright. The test publishing company is listed there as AIR, and then you'll see our percentages and how we fared between last year and this year. We like to acknowledge some clean sweeps when someone in a grade level gets all of the indicators in that grade level. So we have a clean sweep at Williams in 3rd grade for both of their areas. Also in 5th grade at Williams, for all 3 of their areas, they had a clean sweep. At Sharpsburg, we had a clean sweep in grade 4 for math and ELA. So we that's a great feat to be able to, in all the areas that your students are tested in that area, to have a clean sweep. At the high school level, or at the middle school level, we were able to achieve that Algebra 1 indicator, and then at the high school level, you can see on page 1 and page 2 the success we have with American history, and also I do want to draw your attention to among the tests that we take at the high school, there's also a test that's a retake test. So for any student who scored a 1 or 2 the year before, sometimes depending on the number of points they have, we offer or we have them do a retake of that assessment. So that scores a little different percentage to get credit for that, knowing that knowing those tests are challenging to some students, we were able to achieve that green in that area. If you go back to the district at a glance, you can see some moving towards the 80%, which is, we would like to achieve the indicator outright. So you can see how we've made some growth in our 3rd grade reading and mathematics compared to the year prior. So we like to see that. We like to see the movement growing. We also have some areas that you can see where we have not fared as well, and areas where we have decreased. So we certainly know what we have our work cut out for us. So the achievement, if we think about the local report card, and we'll get to the at a glance, it's made up of multiple components. There are 6 components. So achievement, although very important, it's kind of foundational to the whole concept. It represents part of the work. For that achievement goal, not only do they look at the achievement scores outright, but they move into an attendance, a chronic absenteeism indicator, and a gifted indicator. So that's the second thing I wanted to share with you, and we can keep that achievement kind of off to the side. But the gifted indicator for the district, I thought it would be something that we can look at. This is, by all accounts, from the state perspective, deliberately challenging is the way they would phrase it when they came to talk to us about this particular indicator. And so each year we've had different goals around achieving this, and that has been having the most accurate information to reflect our students' progress. That's been one thing. And then secondly is to inch our way up as is appropriate. So the gifted indicator looks at all of the students that are gifted and how they fared in value added, their performance index, and what they call input scores. So this is a year that we met the value-added score, which is good. That's a growth from last year. So we met it outright, which means that of all of our gifted students, they made enough progress to say they made at least a year's worth of growth collectively as a group. So that's the first way you can meet it. So we met that indicator. The second part, or we met that component. The second part of the gifted input is under the performance index. So you can see a list of all the students and the tests that they took and how they fared on those tests. So if a student, most of our students who are gifted score proficient or above, so they were proficient, accelerated, advanced, or advanced plus. Advanced plus represents students that were accelerated in a content area or in a whole grade that first year. They're given a bump up if they score at the highest level. So we did have 2 tests that are students that were identified as gifted scored below proficient, which is unusual, but we again have moved up. We were at 114.016 last year, and now at 116, and the goal is 117. So we're inching our way up with that, and we'll keep working on it. We're close, but we're not quite there. And then the third area, as part of the gifted program, is a little tricky, so that's why I printed it out, just because it represents a lot of different areas. So they want to know the percentage of students who were identified in reading, math, science, or studies, superior cognitive, any of those areas. So they chart it based on your grade levels. And the more students you have at the lower grade levels identified, the more percentage points you achieve. And that's true for all of the areas. So it goes based on who was identified, and then out of the students who were identified, how many of them are receiving services, and then they look at the visual performing arts, and then the number that were identified, how many of those students were serviced. They look at our disadvantaged students that were identified, how many of those students were serviced. They look at our minority students, how many of those students were serviced. And those are all the areas that they add up to give us what they call input points. So again, the more often you identify and serve at the lower grades, the better for this particular chart. So we don't use this chart to guide our work, but we want our work to be accurately reflected in this chart. So just because we would receive more points if we identified more kindergartners and serve them, we don't just test all of our kindergartners to see if they are gifted. We take a really deliberate approach to identifying and servicing our students. And right now we offer opportunities at all grade levels to be identified as gifted, and we do a lot of whole grade testing beginning in 2nd grade. So I think we do a nice job with looking at our students and finding out the kind of test that would allow them to show their giftedness if that's appropriate for them. So that work generated 76 points, and you need 80. So again, we're close. Last year, though, we did have 77 points, but we did not achieve the value added. So I'm really happy that we have the value added component. I'm glad that we went up 2 points on the performance index, and I would like to see more evidence on our gifted input points. The one area that we continue to stretch our thinking about a little bit more is the visual and performing arts. How do we recognize talent? How do we help those students? It's a very individual process, but how do we look for talent in this area? How do we take them through that process? And then how do we work with them? We're great. We did a nice job. You see it come to play more strongly at the middle and high school level, but we'd like to be able to, if appropriate, recognize that talent even younger. So that's one area you can kind of see the difference in the percentages where you could say, oh, we could grow in that area. You don't receive much points if you're less than 2%. We don't receive any in a lot of areas. So that's one area we could grow. We do service our students that are identified. We service them in a really powerful way in terms of being able to service them. You're required by law to identify them. You're not required to service any students that are gifted. So the students that are not served currently could be because they have a program at the Oaks. We have a couple of students that do a program at the Oaks, and the kind of programming, you might argue, is its own gifted service, but it doesn't qualify. So we have a couple of exceptions, or we have some students who simply, it's no longer appropriate for them to be in an honors class or an AP course for whatever reason of their individual needs. Once you're identified as gifted, you're always gifted. So if we identify a student as early in second grade, gifted in social studies, we have to service them along the way, or you'll see that reflected here when we don't service them. So gifted is woven into achievement, and that's what makes it tied to that and an important concept. The only other area that's tied to achievement for that component is chronic absenteeism. And the new goal of the state is just to reduce the students that are chronically absent. And as you know, that is a challenge for us. It's not, our students that are chronically absent, we do a lot of work to target them. And even more so this year, we've done some special things with Glenna and her team of volunteers to help target certain areas where we know students find it challenging to come to school. So those components, so the indicators, gifted, and chronic absenteeism, all make up that first component. You will see the first component in just a second under achievement, but before we get to that, I wanted to move to gap closing, because this is an area that we did grow this year. We were, unfortunately, we were a D area for this last year, and we moved to a C, so when you bump up a letter grade, that's something that shows that we had some intentional work in that area. You will also see some strengths in the gap closing, and you'll see some areas that are weaknesses that we need to grow in a much stronger way. So gap closing is a little complex, but this is the Norwood City Gap Closing Report, and you have all students together and then subgroups listed below. So if we have a subgroup that counts for us, you will see that the numbers there. If they're not counted, it'll just say NC. So you'll see their performance index score, and again, that performance index score comes from their achievement on each of the end of course or end of year tests. So you'll see that listed there, and right next to that, to the right of that, is the goal. If you make that goal outright, you receive 100 points for that area, which is a good thing. So we were able to make all but one of those goals outright. The last subgroup listed there, students with disabilities, did not make the goal outright. It was close, but they didn't make it. And so then there's another way to make this goal, and that is if you can be close enough to that long-term goal, if you can be 1 point away from that long-term goal, or I'm sorry, if you have a gain of 1 point from your previous goal towards that long-term goal. So if it's a +1 in the value added gain index, you would receive those 100 points. If you don't make it, you'll see that it's a negative, and that's what you'll see with our students with disabilities for this particular area of English language arts. So we made 700 of the 800 points in that. We would like to make all components, but we missed it by 1. But this represents an area of strength. If we flip to math, you will see, unfortunately, less green, but it reflects our scores. You might notice that there's a page missing. It's really not. It's just a blank page. So in case later on you say, where's my page 2? There's nothing on page 2, so I didn't print it. The math goal, you'll see, again, the number that took the test, the performance index score they received, and the goal. These are moving targets for the goals. We're moving towards 100 is where they want to be. And you might notice between the subgroups, hey, some of the subgroups have different goals, and that's the nature of the plan from the state about how different subgroups are challenged by this work, and so they made what they thought was a fair plan for them to increase over time. So math, collectively as a district, was more challenging for us to be able to demonstrate that we're closing the gap between the subgroups. So you can tell that we have more work to do in the area of mathematics, and we weren't able to achieve very many of those areas. If you flip to the next page, that's our graduation group. Again, all students and then the subgroups are listed. Our graduation rate for this past, it's a year behind. So our graduation rate, although represents a lot of our students, if you look at the subgroups, you can tell that some subgroups struggle with achieving the graduation rate as well. So we only receive credit for our white non-Hispanic students and our economically disadvantaged students. And also all students. So we did not achieve it for other subgroups. We talked about this before in previous years and in previous months about for some of the students for graduation, students with disabilities, they defer their diploma and go in to do other programs. So some of those students listed as non-grads, unfortunately, might have met the requirements but have gone on to a 1-year or 2-year program. That's demonstrated in the gap closing, and it's also demonstrated when we get to the big picture of how we fared as the district. So that's still a challenge for us. It's a challenge for all schools in the state of Ohio. It's probably more challenging, I would argue, for smaller districts because every student carries a pretty strong percentage weight here. So that represents graduation. You can move on to our English language learners. And you can see that we were able to achieve, the English language learners are charted, they're charted using a test that the English language learners take, which is called the OELPA. So they kind of switch tests on you mid-flight. So they look at the growth from 1 year to the next year using the OELPA as the model. And we were able to achieve the 100 points that we needed to represent the work of students learning a new language and growing in that learning using a completely different test. And that they just kind of tossed in here for good measure, I suppose. And then we can look at our preliminary grades. So language arts points, math points, graduation points, English language learners gives us a preliminary grade of a C. And as long as you have a very strong participation rate, and by strong, they want it to be above 95%, then you can maintain that. And we were able to maintain this. So last year, you might remember that I was disappointed that we had a demotion because we had one subgroup not achieve it. And I was disappointed because people worked so very hard at the high school level in particular, which is where it was reflected, just making sure that we do our due diligence and we test all of our students, and if they're not there that day, we wait for them, we look for them, we beg them to come in. We take care of the different scenarios, and I was disappointed that we received a demotion knowing how hard, especially our administrative team and our counselors work to just get students here. So this year, we reaped the rewards of having a strong participation rate, and we're able to maintain our C rating. I think what's important to say for all of these different areas, a C isn't a C on everything. It's not your old-fashioned 70 to 79%. It's every different component has a different calculation about what is a B here, what is a C here. So that makes it a bit confusing. But that's why we kind of have all these translations in every different area. There's a translation index about like what does a percentage mean. So although it's a 75, so this is a good example. This is a 70 to 79, that's C. And then you go down here and you figure out what kind of calculation they're gonna give you for those points. So that is a couple areas for the district. So let's look at how it will be shown to the public on Friday. And that's the next set of papers. So at a glance, this represents achievement, gap closing, improving at-risk K-3 learners, progress, graduation rate, and prepared for success. All of those 6 components come together to give you an overall score. And on the lower left-hand side, you'll see how they're all weighted differently. They recognize that achievements very important and progress points are very important, and the other areas are secondary, so they receive a little bit lower weight to the overall score. And one thing that I noticed that was different from last year to this year is everything is what it is. So whatever points you receive, it's a straight mathematical problem this year, and it was a little different last year when we looked at our scores. So if we look at Norwood City, the one area that we did better in terms of moving a letter grade was gap closing, and that's probably why I highlighted it earlier. The other areas remain the same, except for progress. We were just at a B last year, and this year we dropped. Although some of our areas, our gifted students did better this year, it wasn't enough to carry us. So, and I think you can tell from our math scores that it had to show somewhere else, so it showed in progress. So we were a B last year, and this year we've dropped to a C. The graduation and the prepared for success remain the same, and our overall score dropped because of progress this year. So we dropped, we were a C last year, and we've dropped lower this year, unfortunately. That's our district at a glance. If you flip to the next page, you can see that Norwood High School, you'll see that their achievement area actually, although it's the same grade, it went up slightly in terms of the component points we received. Everything else except for graduation was the same. Graduation, last year we had a C for the students that were part of the 4-year cohort, and a C for the students that were part of the 5-year cohort. So if you go freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and you graduate, you're part of a 4-year cohort. If you're a student that needs to do something else after that, like go to JVS and do a specialized program, you could be part of a 5-year cohort. What this says to me is that we had more students that perhaps tried to be part of a 5-year cohort and didn't do it, or needed a 6-year program, and so they can't be reflected. They're called non-graduates even if they met the requirements to graduate, or even if it came later. It also does reflect students who had a desire to complete it in 4 years, but didn't even do it in 5 years. So those students are included too, but it most often for us represents students that did additional programming. So we took a bit of a hit on that. If you flip to the middle school, their work is the same letter grades in achievement and progress, and the same overall points. Their gap closing was not, they didn't do as well in gap closing as they did last year. Their overall grade remains the same as last year, but they didn't fare as well in gap closing. If we flip to Norwood View, Norwood View is an interesting chart because you have an A, a B, a C, and a D represented. So they did exactly the same in terms of the overall points given for that overall B, and they did pretty close to the same for their component points for each area. Their letter grades were exactly the same as well. They show their best growth in gap closing, where they recognize that students are moving towards achieving the goal. So they received an A in that last year, and they received another A this year. So kids are making progress there and closing that gap, but it's not enough progress to get that overall value added of an A for all students. For Sharpsburg, Sharpsburg achieved the same in most areas, but they did not achieve it in K-3 literacy. So Sharpsburg is interesting because it's a K-2 on one side of the street and a 3 on the other. So their K-3 literacy only represents 3rd grade, so it's about that 1 grade. And I have called a couple of different years in a row to say, could we not combine them? One year when I did the math, it wouldn't have mattered. It would have mattered this year. We would have been able to demonstrate more growth because when we had students in third grade that didn't pass the state test, but they went on to fourth grade because they did an alternative assessment. So although they weren't as successful in the state test, the D doesn't represent that we had a large group of kids retained because that's not accurate. But the D does represent third grade fall to spring in that year. So, and how many students grew between fall to spring on the state assessment. And that's the one measure where it kind of hits them in a big way. If I look at the primary, they're interesting as well because they, of course, don't have any achievement areas. And you might remember, for those of you that were with me last year, we had an F in achievement last year because they had too many students by the state standards that were chronically absent. So this year they've improved that, so they have an A because enough students improved that. So while I didn't like the F last year, I'll celebrate the A this year, but it isn't a testing indicator, it's chronic absenteeism for them. So they achieved the A. Again, looking at the K-3 component, for them it's just kindergarten to first grade, so it's fall to fall, in kindergarten to first grade to second grade, and then it stops because the second graders are lost in this mix because when you go from fall to second grade to third grade, you cross the street, and neither building gets credit for that.
It kills me that the state can't figure that out.
Yeah.
You lose a whole grade.
I did look up like other schools, like I'm like, okay, let me find a Lakota primary and other districts as examples to just say, did it work for anyone? Was anyone a better sweet talker than I am perhaps? And it all looks the same to me. So I'll still keep calling because I think it's an important message that part of the work is making sure there's a lot of data here, and at least it should be accurate in my mind. And then we work on improving it. But there's a lot of data that is submitted through our EMIS system. And so we want it to accurately reflect what we're doing. And then we know we take an honest look and we look at ways to improve. And that's one area that I don't think reflects accurately. So Sharpsburg has an overall grade of a B this year. And last year they had an overall grade of a D because of that achievement area, which didn't represent achievement. And then Williams. So Williams, they did better in K-3 literacy. They were a C last year and they moved up to a B, so that's something to celebrate. Progress last year was a B with that overall score, and this year was a C for them. Their final evaluation, their final overall points was a B, just like last year. But they did some nice work with some clean sweeps, and that feels good in that achievement area for them. But it is fascinating how it kind of works out that they end up being similar to other schools that might have not even achieved that indicator. So you can see how it's not just do this and you're good to go. There's a few components to it. And there, of course, is a lot more things to talk about, but at least this gives you a first step into seeing what's being published and then a little behind the scenes for our gap closing as a district, our gifted as a district, and then the achievement scores. As you know, I can talk about this work for a long time. But I don't need to do it all in one sweep. And so I'm happy to answer questions this evening, or I'm always happy to talk through it. Some things I do know off the top of my head, and some things I say, I gotta look that up and double check, because even if I never want to misspeak, I always want to check my own accuracy to make sure nothing changed, and I just wasn't aware. So again, first step at understanding, and I'm happy to answer questions today or pull up any other data that could be helpful for your understanding.
So I touched on earlier about graduation rates, and how that's a big deal for us, because we have so many students that defer. Because, so since we're lagging a year behind on that data, I know last year we had a huge number of those kids that deferred.
Do you remember our cohort? I don't remember. But I'll get that to you. And then it is something worth talking about and continuing My argument has always been, call it something different. Say, has met graduation requirements, not who has physically graduated that day, because people choose different paths, and I believe we welcome that, and we believe in that work for certain students, that they need to go on and do a certain path. And for some students, 4 years is just what they need, and off they go to a career, to the military, to a college. But some of our students do some different work, and we should honor that and say that's okay. And it is in our mind, we just have to play the game a bit.
And those are very thought out decisions between the IEP team. So they're meeting, beginning sophomore, junior year to talk about that plan, and then is it appropriate for that student to stay and go to another program? We look at attendance and grades and just the child's disability and whether it's appropriate or not.
We also call them in August to make sure all still remains
Or
the same.
visit their house sometimes.
And visit their house, because if they change their mind and said, no, I decided I'm not doing that, then we can count them as a summer grad.
If they go to the school even a day and then decide, I don't want to do this, then they don't
It's too
count.
late.
It's too late.
It's too late.
So we do make sure that they know what they're getting into before they go. Doesn't always work out perfectly, but we do a nice job of that, I feel like.
It's so unfortunate because it just doesn't seem like it aligns with the graduation tracks. I mean, if that's the push to choose a pathway, and then you have a subset that's still choosing a pathway, it just.
Well, and you're required to keep, students can access special education services until they're 22, based on the IEP team's decision. So federal law says we have to keep them in school if they still need services, but unfortunately it's counted against us on the report card.
They just need an alternative pathways column, and it says, graduates who defer. That's it. It just needs to be an additional column.
They've met the requirements for graduation, so
But
they should be counted as.
That's what we would argue.
If they graduate this year or next year or
They
in
graduate.
3 years,
They finish the
then they
diploma.
graduate. So
Yeah.
they just need to create a little subset that says,
But they don't walk, They walk.
They walk.
because-
They walk.
they do walk.
Right, but they don't get it because they're still they're deferring so they can still be serviced.
Right.
That's right.
So they have met all of the high school graduation requirements, just like any other student sitting in the chairs. They walk at graduation, everybody else gets their diploma, and I hold the diploma in my office until they complete their program. And then we bring them their diploma.
But that gets counted against us.
But that gets counted against.
For doing what's best.
I feel like at minimum.
And
it
if
should
we
count
didn't do what was
when
best,
we give it to them.
it
should
could
just
be
count
a due
towards
process
next year.
issue.
They're just a non-grad if it's too
I
late.
know, I'm just saying, like, if they had that system in place, like, okay, they graduate with their class because they're letting them walk and have that experience, then we just don't get the number for, class of 2012,
Right.
yay, now it's class of 2013, it just, whenever they get their paper, that's when we get to add that number to our column, but it should count
That would be nice.
when they get it, because they earned it.
I will say, the achievement areas, teachers and administrators take it very seriously. So even, of course, over the summer, but once we were all back, that was the thing that people started looking at collectively and making new plans to make improvement. So this data is important to us, and we don't take it lightly, and we want to demonstrate for the community and in support of our students a much higher growth. For some students, achievement is easy and comes naturally. For others, it does not. So we know we have more work to do, and we have some plans in place to do some shifts with resources and some shifts with instructional strategies for different groups outside of what you normally would do to just grow and improve. We know we have work to do, and we don't take that lightly. So.
I do have a question for you about the factors, like, the first factor where we were looking at different factors of students, especially with visual and performing arts and creative thinking, like those numbers. Is there any way to work with our arts department, our civil eds, our performing groups that do all of the musicals, things like that, to identify kids? I mean, obviously this year we have students from elementary age who are participating in those plays who obviously have a proficiency in the performing arts. These numbers do not reflect our very highly skilled performing department that we have at our school. And then also with us adding in STEM programming, I think it'll be easier for identifying creative thinkers who are going to be taking advantage of those STEM programs as early as our elementary age students. So is there a program or some type of idea in place to start measuring those students who are doing phenomenal work in our performing areas as well as our new STEM development programs?
So most of your visual and performing arts, well actually all of it is portfolio-based or performance-based, and each year, every other year, or during the year, we do professional learning with the core fine arts teachers for just that reason. So in November of this year, or if not before, we will be meeting with each of the fine arts teachers to say, let us remind you of the process, and let us think about students that this process might be worth their time and effort. So we will review that, and we do each year, but this year is another more in-depth review year where we go teacher by teacher and do just that. So thank you for saying that. We've done a little bit better job with creative thinking because we have tools in place that make that a little faster, but the visual and performing arts is definitely individually based and requires some behind the scenes work. So when a teacher suspects that, they might reach out to the parent and say, I'd like for your child to go through this process with me. And then off we go with that. So it takes some time, and but it's worth it for the students. It opens some doors for some students that are going into that field. So we have room to grow there for sure. Thank you for that comment.
Then my other question for the green sheet that we had, the curriculum numbers that were reviewed for 2018 to 2019 for spring sports, a lot of those numbers are very similar. I mean, we have, you know, little tweaks of growth and falling behind here and there, but overall I'm seeing a lot of 50s and 60s in core subjects, so English, math, language, arts, science, things like that. How long does this trend need to consistently give us numbers in the 60s range before we take a look at curriculum itself to see if there needs to be a tweak in the actual curriculum to make sure these students are prepared for these tests?
So we do that every year, so that point is well, like I appreciate that. We've made some more dramatic changes, I would say, to our math programs in grades 6, 7, and 8 this year because the scores weren't where we need to be. As we move closer to the 80, you wouldn't necessarily say, you would say, let's look at our interventions perhaps, but if they're further away, you're right, you look at your resources. And it might not be that our resources were bad, it might be that the resources weren't helping the students demonstrate understanding with our state standards on our state test. So the alignment, it's not just about learning math and learning math in a powerful way, it's about learning math so that you can demonstrate that understanding that matches your standards in your state and matches the assessment. So it's a twofold thing. So we have done some changes this year in mathematics in particular, that we think has helped us in some of our 3, 4, and 5 grades. And then we're also doing some different kinds of writing work with our upper students in grades 6 through 12 so that students can demonstrate and can show their understanding through writing so they can get all their writing points when they have to articulate their responses, that their responses aren't just a one-liner, because that often will give you a 0 or a 1 point. It won't be anywhere near a 4 point. So we're doing a lot of work on writing. We have done some new intervention resources or continued some intervention resources at the middle school and high school level to target key students with some of this work. And we've also intensified a little bit of our reading program for the middle school students to help that. We've done some scheduling work that's differently this year that we think will have a yield. We will do some professional learning that will be different. We started the year talking about the item analysis, dedicating the whole part of that first day for our middle school and high school on item analysis and understanding why students answered the way they answered. And they're continuing that at their staff meeting this month. So I appreciate what you're saying, and we've done some more dramatic things, I would say, this year than maybe we did last year, although at the time it felt like we were shifting things as well last year. But we have our work cut out for us when we're in the range in the 60s, because that's not where we want to be. We want to be 80 or above, quite frankly. And we can see the power of that clean sweep when teachers achieve it. And we can see our pockets of excellence, and we can analyze why that occurs and why it doesn't is an equally important task as well. So we've been doing that. People are tied to these scores, and it's personal for them. They want to do well, and it's so very disappointing when we don't. So we talk about it a lot, all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, I do have some questions.
Okay.
So I know Amber talked about scores that are in, the 50s and 60s. One thing that's interesting, and then one thing that's really concerning to me. So the concerning thing is if you look at 6th grade math scores across the board, and then look at how that translates to 7th grade math, and then 8th grade math, and then you get to high school algebra end of one course exam. I mean, is that a typo?
So it is not. So as you know, our Algebra 1 students, a number of them take it in 8th grade. So that's what's reflected in the 96%. Algebra 1 in the high school level are students that didn't take it as 8th grade, but take it as a high school class. And it simply was hard for them. So this year, what we're doing differently for those students is we're double blocking them in math. So we're doing an Algebra 1 kind of traditional course tied to a math lab where they can do math in different ways, because for some of those students, it was really hard for them to achieve. So it represents the students' work, it does, unfortunately. And we've done the same thing with some of our reading work. We've double blocked some students so that they can get those points. Because as you remember, when you're in high school, you have a couple pathways, but the most traditional pathway is getting your 18 points outright.
Right.
So each of these tests you can score, the highest is a 5, but if you're not algebra, you need to do well enough in your mathematics with both Algebra 1 and geometry before you can graduate. You need 4 points between those two. So those students that didn't pass the Algebra 1 last year will be taking it as a retake, but not without an intervention, because it didn't go well for them. We also changed some of our teachers and who they were targeting with their work. So we made some adjustments there as well at the high school level to see if we can have a stronger yield. We think the double blocking will help with that in a great way. So.
The other interesting thing that I look at here, so I link American government and American history closely to English, because you're doing a lot of critical reading and then have to respond to that. But there is a 20-point difference between the American history and American government testing and just our English testing. I would think that, is there a reason?
So the social studies department, it represents a lot of specific work that they did to help with the amendments and to help students master that. So people have different beliefs about that. Like once you know the amendments, you'll do just fine. And other people say, no, it's about, in the English language arts test, it's about the writing. Like you have to be able to write and articulate your thoughts. And that's where we found that our students didn't fare very well. The writing was a real standout as an area of weakness. They just weren't writing enough. I think our social studies department, to give them some credit, did some really specific work to help students. They have some students that are in some honors classes there that are prepping for even AP tests. And so I think that score represents that hard work as well. So it's they're pretty successful. And that we've used that department as a model of how to break down the item analysis in a really powerful way to figure out what to do differently once they have their data. So they've done a nice job with that. Not to say that our English department isn't working hard, but it's not enough right now. We added vocabulary to all students in grades 6, 7, and 8 to strengthen some of that work, and we're adding this writing, some new writing pieces for the teachers that we believe will help that work as well. But you're right, there's a strong discrepancy between those two areas. English 2 would definitely be sophomores. Or I should point out that if you didn't pass the test before, you can take it again in here, so your score is embedded a second or third or fourth time potentially.
Okay.
So some of that are repeaters as well.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying. It is not lost on me.
I do have one ask, but if anybody has any other questions. So my one ask for this, when this does get released to the public, and this happens every year, and you're always going to have people that it's just all they're going to see is that front page, right? And they're going to see that big letter grade right there, and it's the end of the world. So I think what would help me and possibly some of my other colleagues is if we could have, I know there's a ton of data here, and you can really do a deep dive and get lost in it. But if there could be some quick talking points,
Okay, I can do that.
right? Something easy that would be, helpful for the public. Because I know, you've gone through, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and we can get lost in this, and we could spend a whole day going over all this data, but I think some quick talking points.
Yeah, I can put some things together so that
To help explain
what it represents.
what it represents.
Sure.
And what we're doing for future steps, how we're using the data for future improvements. That would be helpful
That's
too.
a longer conversation, but sure, I can
It
put
is,
some things down.
But that's gonna be their thing. If they see this, they say, okay, now how are we fixing it? We got it, but what are we doing about it? That's gonna be the very next question.
And that doesn't stop, that work doesn't just stop because the teachers and the principals and I had, and Mrs. Ashman had ideas at the beginning of the year. Like it continues to flow as we get benchmark data when we do our math tests and we say, oh goodness, they're really good here, they're really weak here, we're gonna alter it. Like that's part of learning and growing, is that we make changes in mid-flight to help the cause. So I can do that, no problem. It will come out Friday, so you'll see an email. Maybe I'll just put it in my status report Thursday so you have it on Friday. Thanks for your time today. I know it's a lot.
Thank you. It is a lot. It is a lot. All right, item 3.04 is the 2020-2021 district calendar. There is an attachment. This is potentially the working calendar for next year. Any changes with this?
May I add one thing to this? We spoke earlier about shots needing to be up to date on that information. I just want to make sure this is shared for public knowledge. On your calendars, you may see due dates for things like turning in your immunization records, which we definitely want our students to have. One of the issues is they're being sent to our health department for their meningitis shot. Unfortunately, our health department has run out of those shots. So if you still need a meningitis shot for your student, please contact your primary care physician so you can get that as soon as possible and get that record into us. You cannot go to Walgreens, unfortunately. We're not able to provide the shot for minors at this time at the Walgreens locations, but you can go to your primary care. So that's just an update for folks at home.
Christine, are there any changes, major changes for next year's calendar? Professional development schedules are similar?
It's pretty similar. I know one thing that we're out before the holiday in May, and our winter break is just about a week and a half. So sometimes it's a little longer depending on where the holidays fall. We start with a PD event before school starts, just like we did this year. We thought that really worked well. It helped us kick off some really the PACS training that has taken a beautiful turn for our elementary students and teachers. And if we had waited and done that in November, it wouldn't have had probably quite the pickup that it had starting with before school. So we enjoyed that opportunity that you gave us this year, and so we want to do that again for next year. And then we're pretty similar with the professional days, although we're doing one in December as planned. But other than that, we're pretty similar.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, item 4.01, or item 4 is the Education Committee report. 4.01 is textbook adoption. There's an AP Human Geography text, The Cultural Landscape and Introduction to Human Geography. Anything you want to add about the textbook, or why the change?
We hadn't had a AP Human Geography course, so it was a new course. And it took us a while to find just the right textbook and to meet with some other people about who's been successful with what. And as you know, AP carries the weight of a test at the end. So we wanted to be cautious about our choice and believe that this product from Pearson is a really healthy product that students have been successful with in other districts. So that's why we're adopting it at this time. A little late in the game, but important for this school year and for those students. So we thank you for that.
And 4.02 student field trips. You'll see that they're all attached. We have View 6th grade heading to Camp Kern in September, the middle school Washington, D.C. trip, an orchestra trip to Wilmington, and Sharpsburg trip to Camp Campbell. Sharpsburg would be 5th grade. I'll just note that View is making a change. Typically they go to the Wilds late in the year, and this year they're making a change to Camp Kern. Any questions? All right, item 5 is personnel, and I'll ask Mrs. Chesson to.
Sure. Thank
to
you.
do the personnel
Thank you,
discussion.
Madam President. 5.01 is a resignation. So we have one resignation listed for your consideration this month. 5.02 under employment, we have a teacher listed for Title I support at Williams based on our federal funding for that. We have our supplemental contracts listed for some of our advising capacities. We will have more technology integration specialists listed for the remaining schools by the time of the board meeting. Our Apex graders, all of the high school staff can, content experts sometimes support our Apex grading because you need a content expert to review the chemistry lab or the writing samples. So our high school teachers, any of them could help with some of that work as needed. Also, number 4, we have our musical set construction listed. Number 5, our after-school club advising for Avenues for Success. And number 6, we are adding in, as required and needed, student assistance and student aides for our various buildings and outside support areas. Number 7, some athletic coaches are listed there as well who've met all the requirements necessary. Number 8 is a change in status for 2 of our staff members. And number 9 includes the resolution and then also the pupil activity contracts for our members that are supporting our different athletics and also our after school area. So those are our employments. And then the last area, 5.03, each year the Norwood Police Department will share their rate of pay for any detail that we might need them for throughout the school year. So this is something that they shared with the district so that we know what to expect as we request a certain detail at different events that they support our work with. And those are the 3 things under personnel.
Thank you, Mrs. Chesson.
Sure.
Item 6 is the policy committee report. Mr. Atwood, 6.01.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, I have nothing to report on the policy committee side.
Been very quiet for you.
It's Yes, that just means something's
Something
coming.
is approved.
Yeah, something's approved.
Item 7, buildings and grounds committee report, Mrs. Cole. 7.1, approval of facility usage.
Thank you, Madam President. As you can see, we have 10 requests for your consideration this month. The first 8 are avenues for success. So of course, all of these are documented in the attachments. Of the 8 for avenues for success, the first 3 are their after-school programs for each of our elementary schools. You can see that they're requesting the cafeterias, gym, auditorium, library, and art room. So this would be on school days 8/21 to May 22nd from 3 to 6 p.m. and those are level A requests. Number 4, we have the Pumpkin Patch Palooza on the middle school front lawn on Saturday, October 12th from 12 to 9. That's a level A. Number 5, lights on after school, the winter sports premiere night at the high school gym. Friday, November 22nd from 3 to 10, also a level A. Number 6 is Glow for the Cure on the high school practice field, Saturday, May 16th with a rain date of Saturday, May 23rd, 8 a.m. to 11:30 p.m., level A. Number 7, summer camp. This is at the Shea Stadium. Use of the concourse, restrooms, and locker rooms during weather advisories. Weekdays, June 1st to August the 7th from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., level A. And lastly, for avenues for success, bounce back to school on the middle school front lawn. Saturday, August 1st, 2020 from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., which is a level A. So those first 8 things are all specific to avenues for success. Number 9, we have the Gym of the Highlands 5K, and they're requesting Sharpsburg Elementary parking lot for the race participants. This is on Saturday, November 2nd from 7 to 3, which is a level C. And then number 10, the Norwood Police Department are requesting Shea Stadium and locker rooms on Sunday, October 6th from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. for the police candidate agility test. That's also a level C. You will see down in the administrative content, we're being asked if we can waive the fees for the Gym of the Highlands 5K and the police department, since those are nonprofits. Proceeds from the 5K are being donated to Norwood Parks, and as the states, we have always waived the fees for City of Norwood requests with their liability insurance. Discussion?
Yeah. Go.
I have one question. And so since we still have John here, for the Gym of the K Highlands, for the parking lot for Sharpsburg Elementary, is that going to pose any issues?
Well, I just noticed right there, we've got 2020 as the date on that, but when I pulled up my calendar, the Saturday, the 2nd is this year.
Right, 2019.
So it is this year.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. We had looked into election day this year, being that they vote in Sharpsburg, and the construction at the elementary should not take place until after Thanksgiving. So I don't think that'll be a problem.
We spoke to Mr. Westendorf as well today, and he said it will not be a problem from the calendar.
Okay. All right, awesome.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
So item 7, the summer camp at Shea Stadium and Concourse. There were concerns at the end of this camp brought to the board's attention by the boosters, and I just want to speak on their behalf to say that they were displeased with the way that things were left at the end of camps, and they have suggested that they would like to write a letter to request that we not approve use of the concourse going forward. So, while that letter has not come yet, because I think they thought that that request would be coming much later in the year rather than sooner. I know it was discussed that would it be better for them to use the middle school where it's air conditioned and they have, a space to use outside that's grassy, or some outdoor space, parking lot area, whatever. Is there a place in the middle school? The construction will be finished by that time. I mean, can we get them? We get them there.
They liked the swimming. They do the lessons and they do the swimming. And we were concerned originally about the temperature. Is it too hot? And they said, no, it's actually delightful. There was a space in that recreation facility, but it didn't meet, it wasn't able to house students. It wasn't a good enough space for that. So if there was threatening weather, they could go into that building, of course, but there wasn't a space that they could use in that building last summer.
To me, it's just kind of a little tough territory to be in because we have two supporters of our students and there seems to be a conflict. So we want to, have a resolution that works best for both of them. We certainly don't want our boosters upset, but we also want to make sure that our kids that are participating in summer camp get what they need also.
Maybe we could just have a like a checkout procedure where when summer, is that what you're gonna say, summer camp ends?
We need to hold avenues responsible for making sure that their counselors have their children, whoever they are, having helped them, the people we're approving to help with these programs are leaving that area intact and let them know that next year's contract is going to be a tentative one based on their behavior and care of the facility that we're allowing them to use that space for. We have to honor the fact that boosters are sinking money into that space and we need to leave it clean or cleaner than we find it.
So I had a conversation with Laura Ferguson. And in that conversation that I had with her, she had told me at that time that she wasn't going to look at using the Shea Stadium space again for the following year, especially since the construction of the middle school would be done by then. So that's what I was anticipating to have happen. So I'm kind of surprised to see that on the agenda like this, especially after the conversation that I had with her. But moving forward, I'm in agreement with Val. I at this point, don't want to support using that space for that particular event. Now, if they want to move that event to another space, that's fine. And it's just not them leaving it, with being unable to paint the door, or, having the concession area wrecked, or, whatever. There were other issues regarding that space usage as well. So,
I know the Lego lab space is downstairs, so that space will be occupied next summer. The Silhouettes do all of their camps and things out of their space on that side of the building. So I'm not sure if we will have rooms there or where they might be, because those are going to be occupied.
I think it's worth looking into. Right, there's a whole building.
Oh, yeah.
Is it, can the high school be used? Can they, I don't know. I keep looking to you because I feel like you have, such a good knowledge base of.
There's also cleaning that goes on through the summer. I mean,
Right.
Scarlet Break comes in,
Yeah,
they pull
and
all
they're
the
doing
furniture out of
waxing
every
and all
room,
that,
they
yeah.
wax the floors in each classroom, then they do the hallways, and there's work that goes on in every building. Now, like you say, there's space in the building, so can we juggle them around as we're juggling Scarlet Gray around? Possibly. I'll be honest with you, I think any place you try to put avenues is going to create its own hurdles. I think it's a great idea what they do, that they're there. It's important that they're there, but where?
why don't we just take this item off the agenda? And then invite Ms. Ferguson to, if she wants to come and present or do whatever, just have another discussion. That might be the best thing to do. I mean, because I don't want to sit here and vote to deny.
Right.
That might be the best thing to do. I mean, because I don't want to sit here and vote to deny.
Right, we don't want to deny her use of anything, but we want to make sure that she's serviced in the way that she needs to be, and that our boosters are happy as well, and our kids still get what they need to get out of that summer programs. It's fantastic. We just have to. I think we need to find a better place for them, and we certainly don't want. We need to find a good place where everybody's happy. I think.
Are they doing splashback also, or do they, since they've got dates through next year, just
Well,
not to see that?
That's for the rec.
Oh, they organize that, okay.
I think that's usually the same day they do the
They
bounce back
usually
to
do it.
school.
That's why I was wondering if it was something we had to approve or not.
Okay. Anybody else, or can we move on? All right, item 8 is Finance Committee with Mrs. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam President. As expected, our revenues for August were low because real estate revenues came in July. Of course, this is just timing, and looking at our year-to-date reports and the attached CFO report shows that. We have some TIF payments that are late, but again, just timing. For the year-to-date ending August 30th, we are seeing about $75,000 in savings on the budget side, or just a fraction of a percent in savings. Our general fund cash balance at the end of August was $13,895,220. In my CFO report is also a graph on our purchase service expenses for the last 7 years. It is interesting to note that separated costs are controlled nicely, with the exception of contracted special education costs. We are in good company, however, as most public school districts are also seeing increases in special education contracted costs.
As you know, we just started a new biennium, and we will see small increases in restricted state aid for mental health funding for the next 2 years. We talked at our last board meeting on how Norwood's total state funding has dropped by over $1 million annually as the state phases out tangible personal property tax allocations. I would like to share my opinion on why. As you know, we just started a new biennium, and we will see small increases in restricted state aid for mental health funding for the next 2 years. We talked at our last board meeting on how Norwood's total state funding has dropped by over $1 million annually as the state phases out tangible personal property tax allocations. I would like to share my opinion on why our next biennium state funding won't be profitable for schools like Norwood either. The last page of my CFO report explains how Norwood's total valuation, the value of all the properties incorporated inside of Norwood City Schools, that valuation is increasing faster than the state average. According to 2 different sources, taxpayers as a whole in Norwood are seeing larger increases in salaries than other areas of the state in the last 3 years also. And that doesn't mean that their salaries are higher than other areas. It means that their salaries are increasing. So we could have started out really, really low, but we're seeing faster increases than the state average. So when you put those 3 things together, the state says, oh, Norwood's getting wealthier. At the same time, our student counts are dropping just a little bit faster than the state's total student counts are dropping. So in the state's mind, this is a perfect storm. And it's a plan for reduced or stagnant funding. And again, I'm talking about the next biennium, so that would be in 3 and 4 years. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward and try to find a long-term solution for our forecast issues. On the agenda, 8.01 has all of our financial reports for your review, including the CFO report and change order listings for both buildings. 8.02, Hamilton County official certificate. We don't have this available yet, but expect it by next week. I hope to get it on the agenda for your review. This is the official certificate. It's our first estimate on estimated revenues for the current school year. 8.03, appropriation resolution. We have 2 this month. One dated August 29th that I used for my amended certificate that I sent to the county, and then a more current one to reflect more current appropriations. 8.04, PAC van rental edition. This edition includes the rental and installation of ramps, decks, and steps for the modulars now that we've changed the plan design to include more of them. 8.05, a new fund. This is the fund chosen by the state of Ohio to report their new mental health funding. So all funding and expenditures will be tracked in the 467 fund. We still don't know for sure if that's going to be included on the forecast reporting or not. I hope we know that before October. 8.06, the service agreement for BCI FBI checks. This agreement allows us to continue offering BCI and FBI checks for staff
volunteers and of course contractors. The district is reimbursed for these employee costs. We don't bear those costs. And I believe that is all I have under finance.
So I do have one thing I want to point out here, and I know we're getting towards the end of the portion of construction for Sharpsburg Cranberry, but when you look at the change order report, I just want to note that on the total running of change orders, it is a negative $67,000.
Yes.
So we've gone through this portion of the construction project saving money, which is almost unheard of going through construction. So, fantastic.
We're not gonna add a marker there.
I do have a question for the student wellness fund. Are there any, obviously, like you said, we're hoping to get it by the end of October. At that point, are we then gonna figure out how to allocate those funds into the district?
No, we've been working on that since they started talking about maybe we would get some funding. So the mental health funding, they've come out with a few guidelines. They're not spending on anything mental health, social workers, psychologists, even I think even guidance counselors might comply. So it is our plan to use those costs. We've hired 2 new social workers with that money. So we've been working on it for quite a while.
Will we have one mental health coordinator in the district that those folks will report to? Or will it be each separate on their own?
We may not have an employee, but we're allowed to contract with a county or a city provider of mental health services or the ESC. So this is kind of typical with the way things happen with state funding is they give you the money and then say, pretty much figure out how to spend it. So we're still in that figuring out stage, but we are way ahead of the game as far as providing services.
Currently, what we have in place now with our 2 new social workers is Shannon Eshman and myself have met with them with Lena Edwards, and we coordinate our services. And then we also have, of course, outside agencies that do some mental health therapy. So we're working in collaboration to keep coordinating. In this example, it can't just go to one person. It's a team approach, and that's what we've been doing.
And
I
they
didn't want to keep giving you
that.
guys more and more work to have to do. If we had a
We
mental health
appreciate
coordinator
that.
that could take that on for the district and then report to you, that I didn't want you guys to be, given too many feathers for your hat, so to speak.
This is, like I said, it is in process. We are not anywhere near finished with our mental health funding or mental health services that we're providing, but we are really doing good on using the money before we even got it.
And they started meetings this month with the building counselor, principal, the social worker, and then Tabard House therapist to talk about each individual child that each of them is servicing and what other supports they may need. So we
That's
may
awesome.
find some needs that we could use this money for.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, that's it. That's the turn.
All motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Mrs. Orza,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Ms. Ballard,
Yes.
Mrs. Cole,
Yes.
Mrs. Rayburn.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.